Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 2nd of October of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And I think that today, on the 2nd of October, we'll receive the most important update for the autumn military campaign. Of course, we understand, we accept that the biggest victory the Russians managed to achieve in the city of Ugledar, and today pro-Ukrainian sources reported and confirmed that they lost control over the citadel, and the pro-Ukrainian map service Deep State adjusted their map in Russian favor. We accept and we agree that this is the most important event of the autumn military campaign, but today, as I understand, we got the second one. And first we are going to begin this video with the Siversk direction, because the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, the armed forces of Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Verkhnikayansk. Obviously, this is a significant victory of the armed forces of Russian Federation, and now let's discuss this victory in details. First, this morning we got the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian mappers and pro-Ukrainian sources. In this video we can see the work of Ukrainian FPV drone flamethrower system. The Ukrainians were burning out Russian positions along the tree line, and as you can see in the horizon of this video, we can see the Lysychansk oil refinery. Based on these two things, it was very easy to geolocate the exact Russian positions, and based on this video, this morning of the 2nd of October, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor in this small block. And later, once again, I'll repeat myself, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that the Russian forces managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Verkhnikayansk. Based on these two updates, we can see now the changes on the ground in comparison with the 1st of October. As you can see, significant progress of the Russian forces, and this is very important achievement and very important Russian victory in the entire special military operation. Now let's discuss this battle in details. First of all, if we compare and if we calculate the current distance between possible Russian edge positions in the most western part of the village and Ukrainian positions on the territory of Siversk, then the distance is already around 4 kilometers or even less, which is already confirms and means that the clashes, that the battle for Siversk has started today officially on the 2nd of October. But let's return back to Verkhnikayansk. As you can see, for these purposes, let's increase the numbers of this since the beginning of September. And as you can see, during the previous months, we haven't been receiving almost anything from this direction. Telling the truth, neither the pro-Russian sources nor the pro-Ukrainian sources reported anything about the Russian progress on the ground. We haven't received even a single video that can confirm how the Russians were storming or attacking the farms in the central part, or how the Russians were raising the flag on the territory of Verkhnikayansk. So, telling the truth and summarizing everything we've been receiving for the previous months, we can say that the victory of Verkhnikayansk was the most invisible since the beginning of the special military operation. Yes, we had some geolocations, but most of the geolocations we received during the previous months were just about how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions with artillery, how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian forces with the FAP 1500, with the TOS flamethrower systems, but nothing about the Russian progress on the ground. Once again, if we believe the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, that means that as a result of clashes during the previous months, the Russians managed to break through the defense of the 81st Air Mobile Brigade, 54th Mechanized Brigade, and 10th Mountain Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, which are the most powerful and well-trained forces in the entire Ukrainian army. Anyway, today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported. Now let's wait for additional updates from some pro-Ukrainian mappers. Maybe Deep State will adjust their map in Russian favor. Maybe we're going to receive some geolocations in the very near future, but obviously it is very expected. We are asking the Minister of Defense or some pro-Russian sources to give us at least some geolocations, some videos that can confirm this Russian progress. Because once again, if this information is correct, then the battle for Siversk has started. As for the Siversk itself, during the previous months, we received significant number of videos from the territory of the citadel as well. Obviously, the citadel of Siversk is much more important than the Siversk, than this Ugledar citadel, because Siversk is much bigger. Siversk is located on the railways that the Russians can use in the future for logistic purposes, and the most important is that Siversk is the last stronghold that lays on the Russia's way in the direction of Slaviansk. If Siversk falls, then the Russians most likely will face no resistance in the western directions towards the city of Kramatorsk and the city of Slaviansk. Anyway, once again, when talking about Siversk itself, during the previous months, during the previous half year, we haven't received anything that can confirm significant Russian attacks. We've been receiving just a lot of FAB strikes, a lot of artillery strikes, a lot of missile strikes, and nothing more. And now we got report about complete control over the village of Verkhnyakamyanskaya. Now let's talk about the situation that took place around the Siversk direction. And first I would like to remind you that just yesterday we were talking about significant activity of both the Russians and the Ukrainian forces on the line between Zhelyznyansk and Makiivka. And yesterday, right in the yesterday's video, we were projecting and making some speculations that most likely the Russians do have some plans to intensify their activity on the line between Zhelyznyansk and Nikiforovka, and we projected that most likely the Russians in the very near future will try to attack the Siversk from the southwest with the purpose to encircle or to cut supply and support and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from the citadel. As for other directions, during the previous months we received update that the Russians managed to improve their positions in Vyimka, and the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation also reported control over this stronghold as a result of Russian clashes. Furthermore, during the September, we got the videos that confirm complete control over the village of Sporne. We have lots of videos with the Russian soldiers that were raising the flags in the western part of this settlement, and from this direction the Russians are going to attack further in the direction of Ivana Daryevka and then further into Vasilyevka. So everything from the eastern flank, from the southeastern flank, and even from the southern flank is ready for further offensive operation in the direction of Siversk. We got reports as well from Perezhne. According to different pro-Russian sources, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to take under control the southern part of this settlement. Now let's talk about the northern direction. And during the previous few weeks, the Russians were pretty active exactly on the northern direction. I'll remind you that according to different geolocations and videos during the previous months, during September, the Russians established complete control over the village of Makiivka and the village of Nevskaya. During the previous few weeks, the Russians were mainly concentrated on clearing the pocket artillery, this artillery pocket between these two settlements, and starting of the 1st or the 30th of September, the Russians began offensive in the southern direction on the line Nevskaya, Novosadova, Terny, Yampolovka, and the village of Tarskoye. And once again, as a result of clashes between the 30th and the 30th of September and the 1st of October, the Russians managed to improve their positions. Now we see the destination and direction of Russian offensive. And once again, this offensive, these clashes, these Russian offensive operations along the river of Zherebets tell us that the Russians began the preparation and began offensive in the northern flank of the Siversk citadel, of the Siversk direction. So once again, something tells me that by the end of this 2024 year, the Russians will get as close as possible to the city of Siversk itself, and most likely within the next 4-5 months, this citadel would be captured by the Russians. Now let's move back and let's move further, and let's begin with the Ugledar direction. Since the beginning, during the 2nd of October, as we already discussed, the Ukrainian sources confirmed that they lost control over the citadel. Once again, according to pro-Russian sources, as a result of clashes on the territory of Ugledar, the Russians managed to capture more than 100 of soldiers. Some sources are saying that the exact number of prisoners of war is around 870 soldiers. And also the Russians are saying that during the previous 5 days, during the final stage of the battle for Ugledar, the Ukrainians, most likely of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade, made lots of attempts to escape the encirclement and to escape the cauldron, and they tried to run away in the northern direction along the tree lines. But the sources are saying that around 60, maybe 70% of soldiers who were trying to break through the encirclement were destroyed by the Russian mortar fire, FPV drone fire, artillery fire, and TOS flamethrower fire. So most likely we can make a conclusion that the 72nd Brigade was not just lost its combat capabilities, but was completely destroyed as a result of clashes for the Ugledar citadel. Now let's move further. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, during the previous maybe few days, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the southeastern part of the village of Katerinovka. The pro-Russian sources have already adjusted their maps by adding additional line of Ukraine-Russian control, and this is approximately the line of combat contact. So as you can see, according to this piece of news, the Russians managed to reach the outskirts, southeastern outskirts of Katerinovka, and there are no more true lines between the Russian forces and this village itself. Now let's talk about the Kurakhova direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians made lots of attempts to move further in the western direction of Maximilianovka. The sources published the video how the Russians were bombing and attacking the northwestern part of the village, while the Russian stormtroopers were moving in the southeastern part. In this video we can see the process how the Russians were clearing another building from the Ukrainian forces. Now let's talk about the original Kurakhova direction, and according to geolocations we received, the Russians managed to improve their positions between the village of Tsukurna and the village of Gornyak. This video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see how the Ukrainian tank was attacking the edge Russian positions within a very short distance. This video first of all confirms additional Russian control and additional Russian progress. So this is the position of Ukrainian tank that was attacking the Russian forces, and the Ukrainian tank was attacking exactly in this direction, which confirms that the northern part of this true line was captured by the Russians. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor and added additional territories under complete Russian control. So summarizing everything, now we can take a look once again how the progress was have been developing here since the late September. So just in the end of September, the Russians just entered the village of Gornyak, and then the Russians were moving almost every single day. They were adding additional tree line at their control, and today on the 2nd of October we have a complete control over the mine between the village of Tsukurna and the town of Gornyak. Now let's move further. We have additional changes on the ground in the original Pokrovsk direction. The Russian forces managed to improve their positions in the western direction and to take under control the village of Mykolaievka completely. At least we have geolocations that confirm Russian presence in the most northwestern part. According to different mappers, the southern part of Mykolaievka also was captured by the Russians. Very interesting updates are coming on the line between Grodovka, Novotoretska and Yelizavetovka. In this video that was published by the Ukrainian sources, we can see how the Ukrainian flamethrower drone was burning out Russian positions to the south of Novotoretska, and this video confirms just additional Russian control area under Russian control. In the northern part to the north of Novotoretska, we have the video how the Russian FPV drone attacked the Ukrainian tank that was located exactly in this point. Based on these two videos, we have adjusted the map. Basically, we have adjusted the contested area because both the Russian area of Russian progress and the area of Ukrainian progress used to be in contested area. Now we got geolocation and we have adjusted the map both in Ukrainian and Russian favors. Now let's move further. The Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces in the vicinity of Dobropilya. Currently, this is the only area that Ukrainians can use for supplying their forces because the Western Railway is already under complete Russian Iskander control. Now just through the city of Lazova in the southern directions to the city of Pokrovsk. Let's talk a little bit about the Toretsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions, at least according to pro-Russian mappers. According to them, as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to improve their positions to the west of Leonidovka, and this operation, the main target of this operation is to bypass the dense network of the fortifications to the east of Sukhaya Balka. We are talking about this territory. During the previous few weeks, the Russians managed to capture at least 3 or 4 strongholds in this area, and now the Russians are trying or are planning to attack the Ukrainians from behind, from on the line Nilipovka, then to the west and then to the south in the direction of Sukhaya Balka. This will allow the Russians to force the Ukrainians to fall back, otherwise the Ukrainians would be encircled. Now let's talk the Siversk direction we have already discussed, and now let's move to the northern Kupiansk direction, because we also received very important updates from this territory. If you remember, during the previous few days we were talking a lot about this territory. We were talking about the Russian failed attack in the direction of Skol River, how the Russians lost significant number of forces. For example, a few days ago, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to take under control Vishneva. And all these attacks, all these attempts to improve their positions from the Russian side had just one important meaning, just one important purpose: to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this pocket in the direction of Lazova, and if it possible, to force the Ukrainians even to fall back further in the direction of Barova. And today we got report from pro-Russian source that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to cut the salient, to improve positions significantly, and to reach the outskirts of the village by the name of Lazova. So everything that we were talking about, we were projecting about, is coming true. The Russians first are trying to cut the salient, this artillery pocket, and only then the Russians will continue moving further in the direction of River of Oskol. So this is the situation on this direction. As for the geolocations, we got some videos how the Ukrainians were trying to counterattack or to evacuate personnel, but the Russians hunted and destroyed the Ukrainian vehicles that were operating in this area. As for the River of Oskol, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were attacking this territory heavily, trying to destroy ammo depots, warehouses. So the Russians were preparing the banks along the River of Oskol before further offensive, before further advance. Now let's talk about Volchansk. Today, almost every single source published this video, and the sources reported that right in front of our eyes we can see the first use of Russian FAB 9000. So the biggest aviation bomb before nuclear bomb. And later the sources reported that this is like a fake piece of news, that this is just FAB 3000 or ADAP 1500. But obviously if the Russians begin using FAB 9000, this is going to be probably just the end of everything. Now let's talk about the Kursk offensive. After a very short operational pause, the Russians resumed their activity in the direction of Plyokhova. We got lots of geolocations how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions on the territory of the village. Obviously, during the next few days, the Russians do have some plans to restore control over this village and to force the Ukrainians to fall back towards the village by the name of Guyeva. The Russians still have plans to encircle the Ukrainians in the Glushkova direction as well, and they're doing everything they can for these purposes. After Guyeva, the situation will be much worse for the Ukrainians if they allow the Russians to move further in the western direction. As for the Glushkova area, some mappers have adjusted their maps based on this video. In this video we can see the work of 225th Battalion of Armored Forces of Ukraine. In this video the Ukrainians attacked and destroyed the abandoned Russian vehicle along this tree line. We are not changing the map in this area because I'll remind you that on the 30th of September there were very heavy clashes, close combat between both armies, Ukrainian and Russian one, were very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians were attacking the Russian forces along this line. The Russians were counterattacking along the same line but in the opposite direction. So I believe that the video that was published today with this vehicle, with these vehicles, is just something like consequences of clashes, consequences, a lot of abandoned vehicles and so on. So for now we're not changing the map, because we think that all these events, all these icons are events of the same battle. We are waiting for additional updates, and if we continue receiving, let's say, additional videos with additional presence of the Russians in these fields, then of course we will adjust the map. But for now we are planning to wait a little bit, because a lot of mappers have already adjusted their maps in Russian favor based on this video. We think that this is wrong approach. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.